Good morning, saints of God, here with you again, Saturday morning, and we're going to continue in our study now, flipping into the book of First Kings as we concluded Second Solomon last week. Briefly going to mention David here as he is on his deathbed, basically, in the book of First Kings. It says that David was old in verse 1. How old was David? Most commentators believe he was about 70 years of age. Is that old? I mean, I just turned 70 last month. I don't think 70 was old, but as far as David was concerned, I think he aged prematurely. The strenuous life he lived, fleeing from Saul for 10 years, hiding in caves and in the wilderness, battling enemies, Philistines, Amalekites, all these people. There were wars. Not to mention the troubles in his own household with his sons, Amnon and Absalom, the rebellion there. A lot of these things caused what we'd call today stress in David's life, and he probably aged prematurely. Also during that time, he developed an ailment that led to the difficulty of maintaining natural body heat. So the people get together and they say, let a beautiful virgin lie in the bosom of our Lord the King, that he may keep warm. They seek a girl by the name of Abishag, a Shunammite. And she was very beautiful, but notice verse 4. The king's nurse served David, but the king did not cohabit with her. So she was not a concubine, as some people believe. He didn't cohabit with her. So this was going on, and David makes another mistake here. He does not appoint a successor right away. He realizes he's getting old, probably knew he was going to die, and he does not announce the successor. There's a delay there, which led to uncertainty in Israel, and also different parties could arise. There was suspicion, pretension, these kinds of things. And, he needed to act here. He does, but there was a delay. How long, we don't know. His oldest son is named Adonijah in verse 5, the son of one of David's wives, Haggith. And he exalts himself, says, I will be king. And he prepares by chariots and horsemen and all of that, royalty. They have a feast at En Rogel. We have in verse 6 here something interesting. I want to read this. His father, David, had never crossed him, Adonijah, at any time by asking, why have you done so? He also was a very handsome man, and he was born after Absalom, who had died. So Adonijah, by rights, is the heir to the throne, but David and Bathsheba, being the mother of Solomon, wanted Solomon to be king. But again, there was a delay. So a conspiracy begins to happen again. Joab, the captain of the army, supports Adonijah, thinking he'll retain his position as captain if he does this. Abiathar, a priest who was very loyal to David, throws his hat in the ring with Adonijah as well, and others. So they're having a feast. They're probably congratulating Adonijah, and Bathsheba and Nathan develop a little plot here, one coming first and then the other informing David that Adonijah was made king at the place there, En Rogel. David finally, wakes up, if you will, and begins to exert his authority and says, no, Solomon, my son, is meant to be king. And that's what God wanted too. In fact, at one point in the book of First Kings, it says that the Lord loved Solomon. So they begin to get the priest, Zadok, and one of the prophets, I believe it was Nathan, and they come together and they anoint Solomon as king. And there's a lot of joy and emotion and noise, and the conspirators hear this. And what's going on here? And it's told to them, Solomon has been anointed king by David. So right away, they're terrified. They think, we're conspirators here. We better flee for our lives. And that's what they do. So the anointing of Solomon took place at Gihon, and all the dismay and terror among the conspirators. And David has kind of a deathbed exhortation to Solomon here, telling him how to deal with these people. We have Adonijah at first is extended kindness, probably because he's a son. And Solomon says, if you do well, fine, you'll be all right. And then Joab. David here shows there's no forgiveness toward Joab, which kind of shows a vindictive side of him. Yes, Joab was a cold-blooded murderer. He killed Abner, he killed Amasa, but David also knew that Joab had stuff over him in regard to Uriah. Maybe it never came out through Joab, but he is telling Solomon, do not let his gray head go down to Sheol. So he's telling him to eliminate him. And that's what happens. Joab hears the word that he is, going to be called into account. He flees to the throne here in the tabernacle part of where people would worship, and he grabs the horns of the altar, thinking that's going to spare him. But it's not a refuge for murderers. And a man named Benaiah, I think it is, who was kind of a mercenary, a bodyguard to David, now going to be part of Solomon's entourage, he strikes Joab down and kills him. Also, remember the man, what was his name? Shimei, threw stones at David as he was leaving Jerusalem during Absalom's rebellion. He was given a probation saying, stay in the city and you will not be harmed. He violates that. And then he also is struck down and is dead. Solomon sees him probably as dangerous. And why did he need to stay in Jerusalem? So they could keep an eye on him, so that he wouldn't be perpetrating some kind of plots or whatever. If he had that intention in him, we don't know, but he also is eliminated. So Abiathar is spared, the priest, but he is put into exile, and Zadok becomes the ruling priest here. So Solomon, as it says in 1 Chronicles 29, sat on the throne of David, his father, and all Israel obeyed him. You might think, well, was he harsh with these people? Think about this. Israel needed a strong hand. With all these plots and conspiracies going on, Israel needed a strong hand. And that's what Solomon did through carrying out these acts of justice. He proved his ability to rule and to secure peace. And then I want you to look at chapter 3 and verse 5. The Lord intervenes here, and he appears to Solomon in a dream at night and says, ask what you wish me to give you. Wouldn't you like to be in that position? So Solomon, unlike his foolish brother Absalom, who tried to make himself king, Solomon is the king. He realizes he's young. He's probably maybe 20 years old at the most. And he says, give me an understanding heart of discernment that I might be able to govern these people. He's not asking for anything for himself personally. He's asking for his monarchy, his government, his reign to be prosperous. And the Lord likes the answer to that question. And he says, not only will I give you the wisdom that you need, but since you have not asked for riches and long life, wealth, fame, I will give you that as well. Solomon, the wisest man on earth and the richest, he begins well. He has a humility about him, and this wisdom carries over into his office. It's not for his personal life, as we'll see with some of his wrong choices, but it's for the administrating of the kingdom, the government, all of these things. Right away, one of the things that takes place is an incident regarding two prostitutes who both have a baby within a few days of each other. One baby is suffocated by its mother, and she exchanges the other baby for her dead baby. And the other prostitute wakes up and sees a dead baby in her bed and goes to Solomon, and both of them are claiming to be the mother of the live baby. Solomon here uses this word of wisdom that is given to him, and he says, "Bring me a sword." I'm in chapter 3 and verse 24. He says, "Divide the living child in two, give half to the one and half to the other." You might think, barbaric. The woman whose child was the living one spoke to the king, deeply stirred over her son, and said, "No, my lord, give her the living child, by no means kill him." And the other said, "He shall be neither mine nor yours, divide him." There it was right there. Solomon said, "Give the first woman the living child, and by no means kill him. She is the mother." And when Israel heard of this judgment, they all feared the king. They saw the wisdom of God in him to administer justice. And then other things as well that took place. So Solomon is king over all Israel, and his claim to fame here is the building of the temple, which David wanted to build. But I think, who was it? Nathan said, "You're a man of bloodshed. You won't build the temple. It's meant to be a sign of messianic peace. Your son Solomon will build the temple." This took about 8 years, the construction of it. And David had gathered a lot of the material and determined the site of it. And Solomon gets a man named Hiram, the king of Tyre, to give assistance. Cedars of Lebanon, skilled people in architecture, and all of these things. And the temple is built after 8 years and dedicated during the Feast of Tabernacles. I'll come back to that in a minute. Other things Solomon did in chapter 4. He spoke knowledgeably about things like botany, zoology, psychology, philosophy, and other subjects. He introduces horsemen and chariots to the army of Israel to make any oppressors from without really thinking of counting the cost. So there's no wars. He's a king of peace. He had a forced labor program, but lenient. The workers were to have 2 months out of 3 in which they were home, and then the third month they would build. So Solomon not only built the temple, but a lot of other buildings also in Israel, many of them made out of gold. The temple itself, 100 feet long, 50 feet wide, 33 feet high, which we know also consisted of the Holy of Holies, pure gold. And the temple was now going to supersede the tabernacle as the new place of worship. You'll recall the tabernacle was moving around in the wilderness and even during the days of David, but now there'd be a temple in Jerusalem, which was chosen by David to be the hub, the center of religious activity in Israel. You had in chapter 8, I want to mention this as well, all the elders and the priests come together when Solomon is dedicating this temple. And look at chapter 8 and where we go, verses, had it here in a minute. Well, he gives a whole extended expression of praise and thanksgiving with prayer from verses 14 to 21. And it says here that the Shekinah cloud, which was in Moses' day, following the children of Israel around in the wilderness, is happening in chapter 8 and verse 10. It says, It happened that when the priest came from the holy place, the cloud, the Shekinah glory, filled the house of the Lord, so the priest could not even stand to minister because of the cloud. For the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. I mean, this is no small thing here. The glory cloud, the Shekinah, was something not to be feared, but it was a token of approval, a sign of God's visible presence. And Solomon gives this prayer of dedication, lengthy and full of humility. And he's referring to the national blessings, which were contained in the book of Deuteronomy. 14 days this dedication went along. 22,000 oxen, 120,000 sheep sacrificed. Much joy in Israel. Then a turning point, which a lot of people don't really see this in the sequence of time. The Queen of Sheba, maybe from Ethiopia, maybe from Yemen or Arabia, comes along to witness Solomon's wealth and his words. Some people say she had a son by Solomon. That's not a biblical record, it's tradition. But right after that, and she's so impressed that even the breath of her is taken away, it says Solomon begins all of this accumulating of wealth and wives from other countries, again, a violation of the Mosaic law, splendor, all these things. It's like it really goes to his head. And there's none other person like him in all the world. I mean, he is totally rich beyond words can express. But unfortunately, the accumulating of foreign wives leads to his dismay and downfall. What do? They incite him to worship their gods. At first, I'm sure Solomon tried to bring them into relationship with a covenant with the God of Israel. Eventually, as he gets older, they entice him to worship their God. So he becomes an idolater. He's still in a relationship with God, although much weakened. And he's possibly sacrificing to these gods, certainly worshiping them. Why did he marry these women? A lot of people think it was because of political alliances. Solomon saw or heard of the wars his father David had fought. He did not want Israel to have to go through that. So he made political alliances by marrying foreign women so that the enemies that surrounded them would not attack Solomon and Israel because their daughters were married to him. That makes sense, doesn't it? So all these things divided Solomon's heart. It led to a divided nation. Pride and compromise ate into his soul. The Lord raises up a man named Jeroboam, who initially is given by Solomon to do engineering exploits. And then eventually, because the Lord sees Solomon's heart is so divided, he tears the kingdom from him through the prophet Ahijah. In chapter 11, Ahijah comes along and gives 10 tribes a coat that is being ripped, 10 pieces of the cloak to Jeroboam. And we'll talk more about that next week. But one tribe, Judah, stays under Solomon for David's sake. We saw that there was a covenant made there with David. Some of his sons, all of his sons, one of them at a time, will remain on his throne. So the Lord does that. What happens to Solomon? He falls away, what we'd call backslidden. But at the end of his life, many people believe he turned back to God. This is when he writes Ecclesiastes. He dies around 60 years of age. He didn't even outlive his father David. And Jeroboam is raised up as an adversary to Solomon in his last days. So one tribe kept for Judah, the others, 10 of them, given to the northern tribes, Israel. What about the last one? That was the Levites. They did not have land as allotted to them. They were dispersed throughout all the land, being teachers of the law. So this is what happens We'll talk more a little bit about this next week, the divided kingdom. But you have in the north now is going to be under Jeroboam, and Solomon's son Rehoboam is going to have jurisdiction over Judah, and I think Benjamin is included in that as well. All right, so that's the lesson for today. Next week we'll cover some more of this. Hope you're getting a better picture of this, and we'll talk more about it next week. All right, God bless.